Word of the year 2016 by the Oxford Dictionaries, but fake news could have had that honor. Of course, the word is questionable and lends itself to different meanings. Everything from celebrity deaths, hoaxes, to political misinformation is now seemingly huddled under the fake news umbrella, writes Megan Sally, an expert with a digital rights campaign in Canada. Everyone agrees that lies are not new, that fake news, like the Underwood typewriter and the flask of whiskey, belongs to the history of news and journalism. However, something different seems to be at play, which justifies that it has been chosen as the theme of Difference Day. And at three universities, Ghent University, Université Brussel, and Université Libre de Bruxelles, have drafted a manifesto which will be released today on fake news, calling for action from the public, from journalists, technology platform providers, and policymakers. Fake news has taken an ominous meaning. It is related to strategies of influence developed by state and non-state actors to sway public opinions and impact key political moments, particularly elections. The focus has been mostly on Russia, in particular, and on the accusations backed by US intelligence services and shared by officials in European countries that Russia has been using fake news via its own media and a network of like-minded websites and social networks to advance its foreign policy agenda, and in particular to influence elections, from Brexit to the US elections, from France to Germany. A recent study by the Oxford Internet Institute claims that 1 in 4 political news stories being circulated by Twitter users in France now are deliberately false or junk articles that voice ideologically extreme, hyper-partisan or conspiratorial points of view. The bulk of the traffic targets Emmanuel Macron, the centrist liberal candidate. Much of this traffic, as the Observer notes, showed traces of Russian influence. The word fake news has also become an instrument in the attacks of populists against the so-called elite media, while in fact these populists are the ones resorting to fake news most intensely as producers and as consumers. President Donald Trump, who has a particular attraction to alternative facts, using the stigma of fake news to disqualify actual and fact-based reporting by the most prestigious news media in order to blunt their role as watchdogs of his presidency. Academics and other researchers have been compiling figures on the volume of fake news, describing its virus spread through social media or traditional media channels, wondering about filter bubbles, opinion silos, linking it to other disruptive factors like hacking, doxing, trolling, public shaming, which pollute the public sphere and intimidate news actors. Politicians and others have been sounding the alarm, warning against the pollution of public opinion, the attack against the fundamental assumption of democracy, the existence of a well-informed and rational electorate. They also have been warning against the destabilization of democratic countries by authoritarian governments determined to sow confusion and insecurity with the purpose of undermining the liberal system and promoting illiberal anti-Western political and social forces. The emergence of fake news, and it is not inconsequential, coincide with the revolution in news ecosystem, the crisis in legacy media, the explosion of social media, the prominent role played by a few giant tech companies, which has weakened the mainstream media and displaced them as gatekeepers and anchors of public opinion. So what's the reality of all this? And what can be done to counter it? Suggestions and initiatives already abound, from counter-narrative strategies to fact-checking, from state-sponsored initiatives like the East Stratcom hosted by the European External Action Service, to measures of filtering and labeling taken by the biggest companies, Facebook, Twitter, or Google, and the development of fake news detection system. The purpose of this panel will reflect on the form of actions, but in particular on the legal front. Can laws stop fake news? This is the title of our panel. Should laws be the favored tool to stop fake news? There are lots of issues involved here, and a crucial one, of course, is freedom of expression. Who decides what news is fake? Well, it's a question that we have to address. On the 3rd of May, World Press Freedom Day, this attention to the preservation of free speech and press freedom is indeed the silver thread of our dialogue. In other parts of the world, from Russia to Ivory Coast to South Africa, Venezuela, predators of press freedom have indeed, right, Reporters Without Borders, seized on the notion of fake news to muzzle the media on the pretext of fighting false information. But some in Western democracies fear that legislating against fake news, and I quote again Megan Sally, leads us down the path of censorship. In a recent statement, special rapporteurs on freedom of expression at the United Nations, the OSCE, the Organization of American States, and the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights have insisted that, I quote, general prohibition on the dissemination of information based on vague and ambiguous ideas, including false news or non-objective information, are incompatible with international standards for restrictions on freedom of expression and should be abolished. To address these complex issues, we have a great and distinguished panel which brings a diversity of experiences and perspectives to the discussion. I sat according to the order I could start differently, but the order of the seat, the arrangement is different. I will start with Dirk Voorhoff, with the Human Rights Center at Ghent University, who says on my left, is one of the leading experts on freedom of expression and a sharp decoder, in particular on the case law of the European Court of Human Rights. He's a member of the Global Freedom of Expression Network at Columbia University in New York and sits on the board of the European Center for Press and Media Freedom. Bob Rugurika from Burundi, who's on my left, is director of Radio Publique Africaine. He lives today in exile, and his imprisonment in 2015 triggered a wide denunciation by the international community. He is the laureate of the 2016 CNN Journalism Prize. Mr. Philippe de Backer is Secretary of State for Privacy in the Belgian federal government. He belongs to the Liberal Party Open VLD and has been a member of the European Parliament between 2011 and 2016. Marietje Schaker is a Dutch MEP for the Progressive Liberal Party D66, D66, and a prominent figure in the European Parliament on all issues related to press freedom and internet. She has been called Europe's most loyal politician and the ultimate digital MEP. And finally, Jerzy Pomianowski here is the Executive Director of the European Endowment for Democracy, an active member of Poland's democratic opposition in the 1980s. He has been the director of his country's foreign service and a deputy foreign minister. And I would just add that a partner of the European Endowment for Democracy will be doing live sketching based on our discussions. Now it will be done by Loa Hazen. I thank him already. So, without further ado, I will ask a number of questions to the panelists, and I will start with Mr. Ponianowski. Fake news, lies, even big lies, are not new. I guess that as a Polish Democrat, you might refer even to the Katyn massacre, the mass execution of thousands of Polish officers in the Katyn Forest in 1940, which is one of the worst cases of fake news. It was carried out by the Stalinist secret forces and was for many years attributed to the Nazis. It took decades for the USSR to admit the role of Stalinist police in the massacre. So my question is, what is new in fake news? What is it that raises so much concern today?
Thanks, Jean-Paul. Thank you very much for inviting. It's a great opportunity to be here, especially that I'm based now in Brussels, heading European Endowment for Democracy that is located here in this city. For those of you who doesn't know what European Endowment does, please read this annual report you can download from our website. That's an obligatory part of my intervention to say that this is a great organization that does a lot of interesting things for the democracy in the European neighborhood. Now, coming to your point, yes, indeed, and I think everybody will confirm this, that fake news is not a new issue. The fake news was used as a weapon in the past, from ancient time. The fake news, fake information was used to reduce morale of the enemy. I mean, we have in the history plenty examples. What is new is, first of all, that it's not only about the fake news, what we are seeing today, It is that we have fake news, we have fake opinions, we have a fake experts, we have a fake think tanks, and we have a fake reality that is viewed by this community. That's a new thing. And of course, internet facilitates the spread and the strength of such a mechanism. But this is really a new thing. And especially this fake reality is something that especially I see a lot in my work when we work in Russia, when we work in authoritarian regimes, countries, that by having no enough access to alternative source of information, alternative experts, to balance opinion, that makes those people living in a fake reality because they are fed all the time with a set of opinion, information, expertise that is totally far from the real world. And if you want to study this, it's enough to open one of the Kremlin-controlled channels and hear, for example, expert debates about banking system. You would be surprised what kind of messages you are given and what kind of economy you are explained. So these elements are really new, and especially the scale of it is stunning. And part of it is a fake news that reaches us and that is weaponized in a different action in the Western world. But I think here, and we will probably hear more from others, because we have enough instruments to counteract that are already part of our culture, our system. It is painful, but it is manageable. But in those countries, they are missing a balanced resource for opinion, for experts, for checking, fact-checking. Then it is a huge problem because it puts people into fake reality and they live in it.
So you mean that it's much more dangerous, I mean, this phenomenon is much more dangerous. I can't speak switch. It's okay?
Your mic is not working, I guess.
So let's see.
Yes,
Now it's on. Now it's on.
It's on? It's on?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
working.
No, just a quick question. I mean, do you mean that in our EU countries, I mean, where democracy is supposed to be functioning, I mean, that you have the same level of a risk for the influence of fake news in countries according to their standards of...
Yeah, the factor of speed is the same, especially internet adds to it. But I think we have many more instruments, mechanisms, and also education to prevent a kind of disasters that the half of society believes in it. Still, if 5, 10%, 15% believes or is affected by the fake news or fake opinion, that is already a damage. But I believe in a self-regulatory mechanism that are existing and they are part of our society that we can manage. But the real problem is, I mean, if 50% of Russians believe that we want to kill them, that's reality that can affect us dramatically. Because then one day they may say, okay, if they really want to kill us, we better kill them first. So this is a fake reality. And that's, in such a situation, can pose. If you ask anyone sitting in this room, do you want to kill any Russian? Answer is no. But if you ask people in Russia, are we their enemies? Do we really mean all the time and plan and build NATO to attack them and to kill? They would say, yes, NATO is our enemy. They want to kill us. So that's the fake reality. And that's dangerous if there is no way to balance it, if there is no open discussion.
Thank you. Nigel Skacker, you are not only an expert on internet and press release, but also on the US as part of the delegation, if I remember well, the EU Parliament and the US. How would you compare the impact of fake news in the US and in our European democracies? I mean, because the description of what fake news seem to obtain in the US, but say, you know, it has been partly responsible for the election of Donald Trump. First of all, can be questioned, but do you think that the same level of risk happens in European countries confronted, especially with electoral, with elections? And a sub-question I would have, I mean, as someone interested in committed to press freedom and freedom of expression, do you think that if we appreciate the impact of this phenomenon too harshly, saying if we overestimate the impact of fake news, there might be a risk that some people would be calling for measures that would curtail freedom of expression.
Yes. So thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. It's a hot topic. And I think we must try to push ourselves to come a little bit more closely. Can you still hear me? Yeah, I can't help it.
Okay, disappear.
Okay.
It's okay?
I'll try to. Oh, it's back. Okay, I was going to try to raise my voice.
No, no. You should maybe. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Can I push? I'm just checking. So he was doing. Yeah, something is here.
Well, it's not working good. But in any case, maybe I'll try it like this. Is it okay? Can you hear me in the back? Yes.
No.
You ready?
One.
Okay, I'll try to speak louder. Okay, you have time?
Maybe easier, yeah. Thank you.
1, 2, yes, okay. So, what I was saying is, first of all, it's great to be here. Second of all, it's a very hot topic, and I think we need to push ourselves to come a little bit more close to the very different elements that are going on at the same time, and that I think are swept up under the term fake news with a lot of risk. So I actually prefer the term junk news, because sometimes it really is a matter of different opinions, and I think that's perfectly legitimate. And also, what you're asking about the risk of overstretching in countermeasures, it's a real risk that challenges freedom of expression, access to information, and other values. Now, looking at the US and also building a bit on the question of, what is fake news and what is new, I think we see a few things accumulating there. Fake news or junk news and propaganda trying to steer people in a certain political direction, persuade them, confuse them as a goal in and of itself, I think is really important to keep that in mind, are not new. What is new is that not only there's a technological revolution, but that the sources through which, or the platforms through which large parts of our population, including young people, access information are very few, and we don't know how they present the information because we do not have access to the algorithms or the specific details of how information is sorted in search engines or presented against profiles, conversations with friends, housing searches, etc., etc. So the technological aspect is definitely new. What is also new in the United States is that there's a president, the politician in the highest office, that has an open disregard for the truth, for expertise, for academics, for journalists, and that is very, very disturbing mix of factors. Because for, I would say, those who have an ambition to have top-down control over people, to feed certain propaganda, an environment where there is persistent doubt, where there are no anchors that give people confidence and something to hold on to, they flourish. And so if you then go back to the question of, do I believe there's a difference between what has happened in the US in terms of the impact of all the different kinds of junk news, propaganda, confusion, etc. On the outcome of the elections and what we see in European countries, I think a lot is still unknown. But the fact that there is a significant impact of how we access information and how digitization impacts not only our democracies, but essentially the way the rule of law applies, for me is crystal clear. And I think it is upon us as politicians to make sure that the public interest is protected and that we ensure that the rule of law applies also in a digital, hyper-connected sphere. And that means that part of the solution that we can find in Europe will also impact people in the US because of the big American tech companies influencing so much of how we access information. And I hope that we will find ways in awareness, in starting a discussion about the phenomenon of junk news flooding people's timelines and searches, to be in time in Europe with crucial elections in France, important elections in Germany, new elections in the UK. We have many test cases, and I hope it will make us smarter in finding countermeasures, not to develop something equivalent to a Ministry of Truth, which is what a lot of people fear, and I understand that concern, but de facto today, Silicon Valley companies are the ministries of truth. And I think that that is something we have to keep in mind. The status quo is not a paradise, and we really have to think hard and deep, and I hope today's debate will contribute to what different elements there are to this discussion, what actual solutions could be, and what, well, I could label it fake solutions would be, that would at the end have a lot of collateral damage on the very principles that we seek to defend, which are non-discrimination, access to information, freedom of expression, pluralist and free media, and also fair competition. So I think we must go back to the very principles that are in general in Europe, but also in the United States, in open societies agreed, and see how we can safeguard them, how we can safeguard the rule of law in a hyper-connected, digitized environment.
Okay, so we already have some ideas about how to respond to the question, can laws stop fake news? There are other ideas that will be floated, and I think probably we have already opened up the doors to these different potentialities to solve the equation. Mr. De Backer, you were a minister, Secretary of State, do you want to set up a Ministry of Truth? What is the approach of the Belgian government in order to try to help solve this conundrum of our fake news?
I think what was described by Maurice is, I think, the right way forward. Also in the European Parliament in the past, we always agreed on many of these topics, but I will try to find some issues of disagreement maybe also for the audience. No, in all seriousness, I think that what we're seeing here today is really an attack on the fundamentals of our democracy. I think that we have to be very clear about this. If I see a president speaking against free media, I mean, he's basically trying to break every branch of government. He's doing executive orders, he's stepping aside from the Congress, he's attacking the legal base, the lawmakers, he's attacking the judiciary, and now he's also attacking the free media. So every branch of an open and democratic, tolerant, pluralistic society is step by step being broken. I think that we have to be very clear about this. That this is ongoing and this is a threat to our open societies. That's the first point I want to make. Secondly, I mean, I'm also a scientist. Before I was a politician, I'm still a scientist even now in politics, and I really adhere to facts and truth. I mean, I know that we as politicians are often accused of twisting the truth and making us look good, but in the end, I mean, the facts always come above the water, even if it takes decades to find out. Ultimately, the truth and the facts will prevail. And I think this is exactly what we need to do also as politicians, making sure that the infrastructure of our democracy is being strengthened at the individual level. For example, by looking at how certain biases, behavioral biases in people are being exploited. I mean, for example, if you understand that people are, when they hear a story and there are gaps in the story, they try to fill them in with all the data and everything they can find. Well, if you understand that psychological mechanism, you also understand how fake news can arrive. If you know that psychologically, if you have somebody that you trust who likes a certain thing or a certain story, that you put more trust in that story. This is a psychological element of place. If you understand all these elements of how people behave, then you also understand much better and also can try to counteract at the individual level and try to strengthen these individuals to fight and to resist themselves against fake news and going to find and look for the truth. But this requires, of course, an infrastructure, a framework, which allow them to do that. Being exposed to different elements, being exposed to different voices, being exposed to different opinions is crucial in that. And if, of course, large media companies or totalitarian regimes block or don't give you access, sufficient access to this kind of dissenting opinions, then I think you are also at risk of really not able to stop fake news anymore. And then this kind of fake news penetrates and really becomes a fake reality, and it really becomes an issue. And the last point that I would like to make is also the fact that I'm not going to set up a Ministry of Truth. I think that this is the last thing that we should do. Again, I'm a scientist. I think one of the first instances of fake news was probably when Copernicus came out and said how our celestial bodies are moving. He was designated as being fake news, probably. Yeah, that was exactly what he paid with his life. So I think that from the government side, we have to be really, really careful not to go into that direction. We are the safeguarders of a free media, open society, free discussion, freedom of expressions. These fundamental liberal principles, individual rights, have to be safeguarded, now more than ever. And I think that is the way that we should do it, that we should try to strengthen that. And this is a fight not only here in Europe, not only in the Western civilization, but I think across the globe. And I think that is something where we often also are not always as courageous as I would like politicians to be also in Europe.
Thank you so much. And I turn to Dr. Gurika. I mean, it's a World Press Freedom Day, so we have to make sure that we have a wider perspective than just the European perspective, because as Lee Bollinger, the president of Columbia University, the university Dick Verhoef is working with, on a project for expression, he said famously in one of his essays that censorship anywhere is censorship everywhere. So if you restrict freedom of expression anywhere in the world, it impacts you in your own country. This is the collision of our repression. I just want to have a question concerning the way you see the question of fake news from your own perspective. I mean, you had been in trouble in Burundi because of defending your right for free expression, your right for press freedom. You were in prison. Has fake news been a part of the political equation in the turmoil that has rocked Burundi in the last 2 or 3 years? And if you want to speak in French, I'm happy to invite you to speak in French since you're...
Yes, thank you. Bon, merci. J'ai entendu que beaucoup d'entre vous parlaient français, et comme je suis confortable à parler français, je pense qu'il va y avoir pas de problème. Donc, tout d'abord, je voudrais vous dire que, bon, comme c'est pour tout le monde, le phénomène de fake news, c'est un phénomène nouveau, c'est un phénomène récent, mais effectivement qui alimente la polémique. Je dois dire que pour ceux qui connaissent la situation au Burundi et dans pas mal de pays où vraiment la démocratie est encore jeune, où la démocratie n'est pas encore renforcée, les gens savent le problème qui oppose, donc le conflit qui oppose les médias, surtout les médias indépendants, aux groupes politiques, aux hommes politiques. Bon, par exemple, chez nous, c'est clair, vous le savez aujourd'hui, c'est un pays où il n'y a plus de place à une presse libre, à une presse indépendante, du fait que depuis le début de la crise, la quasi-totalité des médias indépendants, 5 principaux médias indépendants ont été fermés par le gouvernement. C'était en 2015. Certains non seulement n'ont pas été fermés, mais ils ont été détruits et brûlés, ce qui est le cas pour notre radio, la radio publique africaine que je dirige, qui était la principale radio au Burundi, la radio la plus écoutée au Burundi. Alors je pense que ce conflit-là qui est entre les médias indépendants, les médias qui donnent une information libre, effectivement, pousse certains acteurs politiques, notamment en ce qui nous concerne, le gouvernement en place aujourd'hui au Burundi, de qualifier tout ce qui est contraire à sa volonté de fake news. Donc, nous l'avons vu par exemple dans différents meetings du président de la République aujourd'hui, le président Pierre Nkurunziza quand même, qui vient d'être classé même par Reporters sans frontières comme un des pires détracteurs de la presse dans le monde. Il a chaque jour, souvent depuis d'ailleurs son élection en 2005 et sa réélection en 2010, il a toujours qualifié des médias indépendants de fake news, donc des médias du mensonge. En fait, avant qu'on apprenne ce phénomène de fake news qui est récent aux États-Unis, ici en Europe, chez nous, c'était les médias du mensonge. Donc, c'est là où réside un tout petit peu la différence. Mais chez nous, c'est clair que les gens qui exploitent, qui utilisent ce concept de fake news, c'est la plupart des fois des gens qui veulent échapper à certaines vérités qui blessent. Donc, qui veulent échapper au principe de redevabilité. Au fait, qui refusent de rendre des comptes au peuple. Alors, et c'est comme ça, et c'est ainsi qu'à chaque fois que, par exemple, des médias indépendants font des révélations sur l'implication des hommes politiques dans des affaires louches, automatiquement, dans leurs conférences de presse, dans leurs meetings, et surtout, chez nous, il faut considérer cet aspect, puisque les hommes politiques ont la quasi-totalité de la mainmise sur les autres institutions, notamment par exemple la justice, le Conseil national de la communication par exemple, qui est un conseil de régulation des médias. C'est téléguidé par l'exécutif souvent. Et c'est là où les médias deviennent fragiles, surtout les médias libres, les médias indépendants, deviennent fragiles par rapport à ce concept, à ce phénomène de fake news. Parce que quand c'est prononcé par un ministre du gouvernement, automatiquement, les institutions comme la justice, effectivement, a tendance à croire effectivement que les médias mentent, les médias donnent des fausses informations. Mais chez nous, c'est intéressant, il faut voir. Il faut aussi considérer le fait que chez nous, la communication, ce n'est pas comme cette communication en Europe, aux États-Unis, où on voit surtout une communication qui se fait sur les réseaux sociaux, sur beaucoup de blogs, sur les sites internet. Chez nous, la communication, la quasi-totalité de la communication, chez nous au Burundi, mais aussi dans pas mal de pays d'Afrique, c'est la radio en fait. C'est parce que la communication, c'est de bouche à oreille. C'est ça la culture de la communication chez nous. Alors, là quand même, le phénomène de fake news n'a pas encore complètement atteint la population dans son ensemble, parce qu'effectivement, souvent les médias parlent des faits qui existent. Alors, si les hommes politiques, ou bien si une quelconque organisation peut qualifier de fake news certaines informations qui sont en circulation, souvent ils ne parviennent pas vraiment à convaincre, parce qu'ils ne parviennent pas non plus à démontrer sur base des faits que ce sont des fausses informations. Et puis, le fake news, chez nous, la fausse information, elle est sanctionnée par la loi sur la presse. Donc, chez nous, le phénomène par exemple, des réseaux sociaux, ça n'existe pas comme tel, parce que d'abord, moins de 10% de la population a accès à Internet, ce qui fait que le phénomène de fake news n'est pas vraiment quelque chose aujourd'hui qui affecte la vie des citoyens. Mais malheureusement, tout récemment, avec la crise de 2015, ça affecte les citoyens dans le sens où le gouvernement a décidé violemment et en violation de toutes les procédures, de toutes les lois, de fermer les médias. Donc sans aucune forme de procès. C'est là où nous souffrons de ce phénomène de fake news, parce que visiblement on se rend compte que le fake news, l'usage même du fake news devient une arme des hommes forts, des hommes puissants qui détiennent le pouvoir pour réprimer les médias, surtout les médias indépendants, mais aussi pour réprimer les opinions des gens, pour réprimer en fait la liberté d'opinion et la liberté d'expression. Donc je crois que c'est un peu ça la différence et l'impact et la conception que nous avons du fake news chez nous. C'est devenu un outil de répression, un instrument du pouvoir pour réprimer toutes les voix discordantes.
Thank you. In a few words, I mean, what we have been mentioning really there's a special issue here in some countries where fake news is being used by governments as a tool of censorship. By accusing independent journalists of producing fake news, it's a way for them, for those governments, to impose new forms of censorship. This is something which, of course, is one of the major dangers, even in our democracy. There would be a shift because of the will to kill fake news, to go too far into regulating, into censorship. We arrived to the key point of our discussion, which is the legal aspect of it, precisely. Thanks to going through via Burundi, we arrived to the core of the discussion, which is the theme of can laws or should laws stop fake news? And I would ask are there already laws in Europe which address those issues that have been mentioned? or might be used to address those issues without compromising, as the speakers have insisted, the respect for fundamental freedoms. And should new laws be adopted that would really be tailored to the specific issues that have been raised that are treated by fake news?
Thank you for this question, Jean-Paul, and also thanks for the invitation to take part in this panel. But your question goes against the essence, I think, of the central value of freedom of expression in our democracies. That's freedom of expression is a right to everyone. We create a marketplace of ideas and information. So we hope to find the truth, or maybe to come closer to the truth, or to come as close as possible by the diversity and the pluralism that we hope to install in our societies. That is the very essence. And if we look at historical, but also contemporary examples where freedom of expression is restricted, is curtailed, where censorship, where monitoring is installed, it goes to the detriment of these central values in our democracies. So I think the answer is not in restricting freedom of expression, but it's by using the law, and I would say regulation, in a much broader perspective in order to support and to create an enabling environment in which opinions, information can circulate, and that there can be scrutiny of the quality of the information. But in an attempt to answer your question, do we have laws? I think the closest we get is defamation laws. That's a universal principle. We protect the reputation of individual persons when it is damaged by allegations which are false, deliberately false, blatantly false. Then criminal law in many countries, or civil law, can be an answer. But this is about the reputation of persons, where defamation laws are extended to other notions, to institutions, to the government. It becomes very dangerous and it is abused. Even criminal law, as defamation, is very much abused by those in power, politicians, captains of industry, people with power abuse these laws to intimidate journalists, NGOs, etc. So it is a part of an answer to protect the reputation, but it contains an enormous potential of abuse of these laws. So I would be very prudent to extend the notion of defamation laws to a broader spectrum in order to put more emphasis on the truth, because it's precisely those who say that some allegations lack a factual basis because they haven't been to court, is because they control the courts, they have the power, they stay out of the scrutiny of journalists and the people. So that would be very dangerous. I would say rather the opposite. We need anti-SLAPP legislation and strategic litigation against public participation. These laws are very much abused in many countries, and I think there's a need in many countries to do something against this intimidation and use by defamation laws. That's one point. But to turn it around, the more positive potential of regulation I see in a diversity of fields, and some have been mentioned by Marietje. First of all, I would say access to public documents. Improve the easiness and the accessibility and the enforceability to have access to public documents, because the more is public, the more difficult it becomes to cheat the others. Information monopolies lead to abuse of that position. So, and here I think we have a big task also in Western Europe. We can improve access to information laws, and in some countries what had been achieved already is now on the way back. So that is something very dangerous. And I think, for instance, Belgium, to have a very concrete proposal for this panel, Belgium could ratify the European Convention on Access to Official Documents. For the moment, there are 9 countries who have ratified this European Convention. There need to be 10 to make the convention come into force. Belgium has signed the convention years ago, but it has never ratified. So that could maybe, to State Secretary Mr. De Backer, to pick that idea up and to make that Belgium becomes the missing link, the 10th member state which brings this Convention on Access to Documents for the whole Council of Europe region, 47 member states, into force. A second one, support, protect whistleblowers. And I think there's a clear lack in most of our countries to protect whistleblowers, because they are the ones who can reveal things which are denied by those in power. So that's very important. The EU has a proposal, the Green Party, for a directive. The Council of Europe has a recommendation. I think Belgium should very strongly support both these international instruments for Europe. A third element, I would say, use better the right of reply. In many of our countries, we have a system of a right of reply. It's not functioning always very well. And in Belgium, we have a problem. It's only applicable for the printed press and for radio and television. It cannot be a very big legislative effort to make the right of reply also applicable in the online environment. So these are three concrete examples. And the last one, I would say, policy and subsidies. Instead of subsidizing corporate organizations, big media firms, generically, better use this money for targeted subsidies of investigative journalism, for independent platforms of media working with whistleblowers. I think these are instruments to empower our democracies rather than to censor and to restrict, because that's a weak point. We cannot win that, but also it is detriment for our own values. So I don't think we should follow that track. And some other recommendations you can read in the manifesto, but it's still under embargo, but I have given already a few hints in which direction it goes for this evening.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, is there someone on the panel who would, sort of, to some extent, make a case for the introduction of new laws, or not? I mean, or do you agree with the proposal that this is the path that we should follow? Rachel?
I would like to respond to that, but also emphasize very much what the journalist from Burundi said, how we have all stepped into the frame of those who seek to silence a plural debate. We are now here, sitting in Belgium, in Brussels, in the heart of Europe, talking about fake news, even though that's a term that was invented to silence independent media. That's a problem. It's a success for those who we must, in my opinion, challenge. So I think we have to be very critical to ourselves what words we use for what. That's one just point I wanted to emphasize, because the global impact and the fact that now people like Putin can say, oh, finally in Europe and the United States they've woken up to what we knew all along, that fake news is a problem and, you know, these voices have to be silenced. It's a big problem for our credibility as open societies. So I want to emphasize this global perspective very much today, because it's Global Press Freedom Day. It's very important. Now back to the laws. I believe that we have most laws in place. Defamation, anti-hate speech laws, or laws prohibiting hate speech or incitement to violence, but also strong safeguards of protecting access to information, freedom of expression, fair competition, non-discrimination. Many of them have elements in them that we can use. But they're not used to the extent that I think we should to tackle the issue of how people see information. We need to really think about the young generation. The idea that people pay for news media is becoming extinct. And if you have platforms like Facebook, where young people spend most of their time in general and get access to all kinds of information, we really need to think about how we want to achieve goals that I believe are still uncontested in our societies here in Europe, of having a pluralist debate, of seeing media pluralism as an essential part of democracy. If we want to achieve the same principles, we have to change our methods. And that's the last point I wanted to make. And I was just thinking about that when I was listening to Philip and his points about, respect for the truth. In the comparison to science, what is interesting to me is that scientists, I believe, constantly try to approach the truth, while understanding that with time, the concept of truth and conviction changes. Just look at medicine, where hundreds of years ago scientists believed that if you had an illness, you just cut and let out some blood and the bad will flow out too. I mean, today we don't do that anymore. And I'm sure that in 100 years, some of the ideas that we really are convinced about by majority now will seem outdated. But what is key are the methods of how we approach research, how we take steps to approach what we know to be truth today. And I believe that media organizations can also do more to be explicit about the methods and the ethics that they use to distinguish themselves from those who use different methods, who just throw out perhaps defaming, perhaps outright false or non-researched, non-substantiated stories, which are also hard to distinguish for people. If you've never learned, if you don't have a history of certain authoritative sources of information being a part of your information palette because your parents maybe didn't have newspapers, or because you grew up in a time where news sources are not only many, but also attacked at the highest level, as we talked about in politics, you know. It's a very different starting point than perhaps where we started today. So if, to come back to the main point, if we want the principles of open societies and democracies to be robust and survive, we have to apply different ways to achieve these protections. And so instead of creating new mechanisms or outsourcing solutions to the same tech companies, which also happens, let us go back to the very fundamentals of our open societies and our liberal democracies, and then see what we have to do to make sure that the rule of law applies also in a time of quick technological developments and a very different media palette, media menu, information landscape.
Yeah, quick reaction. I mean, I think the key word remains pluralism, and also maybe transparency. I think if those two can go hand in hand, we already have a large part of the solution. One of my favorite phrases I used a lot in the European Parliament, and even nowadays when I'm in debates, is always I say, you have the right to your own opinion, but not your own facts. And I mean, that's exactly what's going on. A lot of people are creating their own facts in order to substantiate opinions which basically in normal, where no fake reality would exist, they would not be upheld. But I mean, for me, expressions are free. I mean, I think we are very clear that freedom of expression is a fundamental right. I think we also have to make sure that we safeguard that for the reason that Bob was mentioning, that we cannot turn it around and that it can be used against you, of course. So I think there is a role to play, an essential role to play for journalists, academics, philosophers even, I might say. There was a nice book written a couple of years ago, Where Did All the Philosophers Go? It's worth reading. And I think we need people with that kind of background, a very diverse background, to really step back into the public debate and again put the public debate at a much higher level than it is today. I think we as politicians, we often plead guilty in that respect also, but then on the other hand, when I often look at debates, sometimes I can be really mesmerized by political debate or by public debate between philosophers, academics or politicians, but often other times it's not really substantive. And I think that's really something where intellectuals should play a much more important role than today. And the last point I would like to make, in order to do that, indeed, you have to strengthen these voices. You have to strengthen academic independence. You have to strengthen also journalism. I mean, Sven Gatz, my minister at the regional level, one of the things that he did when he was questioned about fake news, he made available more than €500,000 to invest in investigative journalism, in online journalism, to really strengthen this independent voice. And I think that's also something that we, from the government side, can do. But I'm really withholding myself into stepping into, let's regulate more and more and more, because in the end, that kind of dagger always turns against you.
So the role of the state would be to create an enabling environment for press freedom and for
absolutely
better form of journalism that is able to counter fake news. You wouldn't be going along, for instance, the measures taken by the Obama administration, for instance, and the Congress a couple of months ago to fund specific initiatives. I mean, trying to fight back against fake news. You would consider that as being too far for a state, or even as the European External Action Service, which has Stratcom, which is I would say governmental, public authorities funding those kinds of initiatives. Would you be wary of those kinds of intrusion into the state, into more concrete actions?
I think you have to be very careful with that. I think it can be something that can be done to develop a counter-narrative in certain very specific circumstances. For example, we see it being used when it comes to radicalization of young people, that you try to use also the internet to develop a counter-narrative, to at least expose them to some of the alternative way of thinking or alternative explanations that are being provided. So maybe under these circumstances I would maybe go along, but then it should also be clearly described, clearly limited in time, clearly under the scrutiny of also the public debate. And I think that is something that's also sometimes lacking, because often these things are being developed in quite a covert way.
Lee, you need to react as well, and then I will give the floor to please.
Well, I would like to just for a moment put our attention on the mechanism itself, because if we ask ourselves whether law or new law, something can be done, we have to understand maybe better the dangers, because usually law responds to certain dangers, threats. If someone wants to kill me, I hope law protects by providing certain measures that can eventually prevent this. If we look into this sequence between fake news, fake opinion, fake experts, what is most dramatic and most difficult to be addressed is that those fake news creates real emotions. And today politics, today world is driven mostly by emotions, not by rational mind. And that is the biggest surprise for elites. That is the core of what we are facing in rise of populism and nationalism. That they use much more emotions than the facts, much more emotions than the arguments. And this is a main, for me, a sign of a reality that is defined as post-truth reality.
Mm-hmm.
We don't look into the truth, we look only into what are the emotions and how we are driven by them. If there is a fake news, even according to the law, with the word probably at the end, saying probably a Syrian refugee raped a girl in Dortmund yesterday, the emotions driven by this fake news are real. People are afraid, people have their anti-immigration agenda immediately at upper level, and if this is 1 week before electing, your parliamentarian, and so on and so on. We know this consequence. So how to deal legally with emotions? There is no such a legal instrument yet. We can trace the guy who said probably the girl was raped by the Syrian refugee. But then the judge would say, well, he said probably with the question mark. So by all legal frameworks that we have now, we can't sentence the person. Not mentioning the speed, it will take months to process this kind of legal case. So here I have no an easy answer how to deal with it, but I see this as a real problem, both existing in a closed society in much larger scale and in an open society as we see it now. And just to give you another element that refers to education, we are talking, okay, maybe media literacy and the good education in schools will lead to the better situation. But just recently, my 11-year-old daughter was chatting with her friend in Poland on a Snapchat. There were 5 or 6 girls participating in it, and they were discussing where is more secure, in Poland or in Belgium. And the one girl said, in my opinion, Belgium is more secure because I feel very safe when I go out of my house. But the girl from Poland said, but in news they were saying there is a terrorist attack, so it's not safe in Belgium. And the other one is saying, yeah, but there are more car accidents in Poland, so that's not safe in Poland. And then I started to talk with my daughter, okay, which part of it is opinion and which part of this is a fact? Statistically true, in Poland there's much bigger death toll in a car accident than in Belgium. So on the road, it's much safer in Belgium. That's true, there was no terrorist attack in Poland. There were some terrorist attacks in Belgium. So from this point of view, so here And that was so difficult. It took me 1 hour to discuss with an 11-year-old person how to explain the difference between opinion and actual factography, which is measured by figures. So this is the point that I don't have an answer, and I hope lawmakers will have. But definitely this society is driven by emotions. It's something that is happening to us right now. And when we look language of the Trump, he addresses emotions. When we look language of the Putin, addresses emotions. When you look all populists, including Marine Le Pen, mostly addressing emotions. And then we know it's from the industry standard as well. If you look at advertisement industry, you open any book on advertisement and says, if you drive emotions, you sell more. So it's a simple rule that we discovered already 50 years ago, and we are exploring to the extent that is killing us.
So we need to check next Sunday in Paris. I invite you to...
Yeah, it's fine that we have emotions, and let that be clear, and let's hope that the law can never do anything about that to influence. But I would like to use the assist also to look at law in that broader perspective of regulation. Because I think that, for instance, self-regulation, professional ethics, there you can work on these issues of do not create polarization. So therefore, I think that the media professionals, they can play an important role to create a platform which create more trust, and that you can see the difference between what is professionally produced, journalistic ethics, and all the rest which is on the internet. So I think there's some need to regain trust by the media professionals, and maybe they didn't do sufficient efforts on that issue. What I also would like to say is the dangerous mix that we see a lot and we read a lot about it between hate speech and fake news. Because I think we are absolutely right to be very much concerned about incitement to discrimination and incitement to violence. We have clear criminal laws about that, we have international treaties, we have instruments, we have agencies, that's very clear. But when it comes to fake news, it's about something else, and it's about opinions, it's about different perspectives. And I have the impression that some of the first proposals who have been formulated, for instance by the Minister of Justice in Germany, has also made a little bit of a dangerous mix of these two elements. When you read the law proposal, it is about to combat hate speech, but the whole discourse around made it to combat fake news, and that's a very dangerous mix. I think we need to be aware of, and they should never be put together, although they have an influence on each other, but it's completely different instruments that we need, and with regard to coming closer to the truth, we need other instruments, and there I would like to support also the idea. I think that academia, universities, have also, in this debate on how it influences democracy, an important role to play, more than they did until now, I think, and to work together with networks of journalists, fact-checking, with NGOs. I don't think that our universities until now have done that enough, so they can contribute there, and it's not by specifically funding them for this project, they can be part of it, but it's a bit in the direction what Philippe said. It's to create and to structure, and on a permanent way, sufficient possibilities, because it's part of this delegitimization which is going on. It's the judiciary is not trusted anymore, experts and academics are not trusted anymore. So I think the answer also needs to come from there, to empower them and to find new coalitions to make it happen, that it goes in the other way around.
I think the difference rate, precisely sponsored by 3 universities, is a way to reconnect academics coming from the ivory towers.
Yes, it's different worlds, and journalists and scientists, for good reason sometimes, they distrust each other, but I think there are bridges to make, and there's really something that should be worked on.
I just wanted to briefly come back to the point of this East Stratcom and the question of do we need laws, because frankly East Stratcom doesn't need a law, it's a policy, and also a number of the examples that were mentioned are initiatives that can be taken today without a legal change. So I think we should all look at what we can do if we care about the future of our liberal democracies, and perhaps one of the conclusions is that we got lazy as a collective and that we made some wrong budget cuts. So, for example, in foreign language media, there has been a lot of budget cuts.
Yes.
And right as European countries were all cutting those budgets, and it's just about funding media, and then the journalists can fill in their own editorial freedom what that media does and says and reports on. But just as we in European countries were cutting back significantly on those budgets, countries like Russia were increasing their funding, and I think that that's the impact that we're seeing. And you know, East Stratcom puts out information to audiences that otherwise may not be reached, mostly providing access to information or a breakdown of the allegation with an answer. But we must be very careful that they're not seen as counter-propaganda. There are specifically policies addressed to deal with the problem of propaganda, but I would consider that something different from the challenge of what we call fake news. I mean, or junk news. I mean, access to all kinds of different alternative news sources may be a part of a propaganda strategy. That's true, but there's more to propaganda, and there's also just people who, for example, want to make money easily with blogs, for example, that have all kinds of sensational stories, which are clickbait, and it's more attractive to advertise against, and that I would not label as propaganda, but I would still understand why it's a problem if everybody only reads those news sources. So I believe indeed a more clear analysis of what the challenge is, what we want to address, whether we need laws or policies or just initiatives from society to address this or to teach kids more to critically look at the information, because I think there was no, you know, nothing strange, let's say, in the conversation between your daughter and her friends. They heard different things, they tried to compare the value of that information, and that's important. Critical thinking is obviously super important. And anyway...
It takes time, just as I wanted to point, it takes time.
Of course it takes time.
And it takes an effort.
Yes, and yeah, definitely, but I don't know if the law could have done anything for you. It was basically my point.
Okay, thank you so much. So it's already 2:10, so I will turn to the audience. If you have questions, please raise your hand as you did. Identify yourself. I think there's a mic somewhere. It will be coming to you. I hope so.
You can use mine. I don't know if there's...
I think there should be a mic somewhere.
Maybe if there's a little bit more light that we can put on the audience, it's better for the speakers to see who's...
interacting with it.
Yeah.
Is there a mic available somewhere?
Thank you. I have a question to Mrs. Schaake and to Mr. Poniatowski, because of your work and the region where you come from. It was also about fake news, and I must say I'm still in shock. Those people were generally working in and around the European Parliament, European Commission on the one hand, and on the other hand they were from Eastern Europe. And there was a proposal from the panel to start a sort of Ministry of Truth organized by the European Union, and everybody present there was in favor of that. And so my question is, how representative are you? I mean, well, I know who you are because we are from the same country, but how is it, what is happening with all those 20-25% East Europeans in European Parliament? Do they agree with what you're saying? Or were the people I met some days ago, are those people representatives? And same question to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, keep in mind. Yes. Well, I will answer only. I have recently, actually, European Endowment for Democracy presents its annual report to the Parliament, European Parliament, regularly, so annually. And recently I did present, and there was a French parliamentarian that was extremely critical about the work the endowment does, saying that what you do, supporting NGOs in Russia, in Ukraine, in other countries, in Egypt, it's an interference in their internal affairs. And I'm extremely happy that my country, France, is not supporting you, which is not true, they do support, but still expressing this very much. And this is one of those 25% that represents extreme right point of view in the European Parliament. There is a Europarlamentarian, Mr. Korwin-Mikke, who openly says that women think differently, that there was no women inventors in the history, and he feels like, no punishment, nothing. Recently he actually got punished by some ethics committee, finally. So, I mean, this is the freedom that we are fighting for. To have this 20% of guys that I totally disagree in one parliament, in the setup, in the audience, whatever place we can have. And I am ready to continue to fight for having them with us, but I believe that the 75% represents more close to my point of view, that women are equal to men, that supporting people in open way who are striving for their democracy. It's our right, obligation, moral value, and this is not an interference. So this is I mean, I don't see here a huge tension. I was always in my past fighting for the reality in which I can meet those people in a normal condition. We can discuss, I can listen to them, and I can tell them, you are not right, but I will not tell him you are stupid. That's the difference. So here, or I hate you. That's the way how I would like to handle this issue for now and for the future.
The question was
Yes. I don't know where you were, so it's hard for me to reflect on what you've heard there. But I would be, I would think that there are also people who have extreme ideas. We compete in an open arena of ideas. Almost everything we do is on the record. At the end of the day, we vote, and before something passes, you need a majority. So first there is a big debate about what solutions might be. Sometimes there's legislative action, sometimes there is not. So probably both opinions that you hear today and that you heard earlier on are representing slices of European citizens that have voted for these representatives. And in my experience, actually, the former Soviet member states or, for example, well, former Eastern Bloc, yeah, if you want to call it that, they, the people that I meet, different political parties, different generations, have more sensitivity about overreach by the state than the average, I would say, because they have in their personal, vivid memory what it means when you have something like a Stasi, when the individual is not protected from government, not only by government.
Just one word. It was the European Union. They don't see it as a state. So they mistrust their own country, but they think the European Union, if we give them the censorship, then everything is okay. And that, I think it's very worrying.
Censorship is indeed very worrying, I agree.
But the European Union is an organization of values. So at a certain point also is an issue whether everybody in the European Union shares same values. And that's here we have not a censorship, but a set of values. I believe in those values, like open society. If one of the members of the European Union closes its society, I would have a problem with this.
Thank you. We will take a second question. I think Hassan up there. Can you stand up and perhaps try to speak loudly?
Yes, I will try. Just two very, very quick ones. One on a technical level, to what extent would it be possible without a law just to develop kind of a praxis or a methodology by which through, let's say, a peer-to-peer evaluation from journalists on their respective reliability, not on the quality of the opinions that they express, but on the facts that they propose to support their opinion, and then having kind of a rating as part of the solution to the question. I think Wikipedia is a similar system that one could look at. And the second question, more at the theoretical level, is that these 20% of people that we don't like are there because they have been elected, they have been voted for. And my question is to what extent is fake news or junk news a problem in itself, and instead to what extent isn't the fact that people believe in fake news and news. So we don't have let's say, the antibodies, if you want. So is the failure kind of a distinct one? Do we have to have a broader perspective when we look at that, and maybe look at our educational system as well?
Anyways, it's a statement or explanation, but more than a question. If someone wants to react to this,
Yeah, maybe quickly. I mean, yes, fact checks are very useful, I think, and journalists checking other journalists or stories, checking them out and making fact checks are nice. The system that exists in science is peer review. Before you get published, you get your paper reviewed by a couple of your colleagues. It's a system which works up to a certain level. Not everything is called out, and on the contrary, I think more and more academics are also questioning if peer review is still the adequate way of advancing science, but that's I gladly leave to Dirk also to discuss a little bit about peer review. The question is actually a fundamental one on two levels, in my opinion. The first one is, how in a liberal society do you deal with illiberal opinions? I mean, how far do you tolerate your own system to be undermined by internally? I mean, and we know the examples from history to what it leads. But at the same time, I also still and believe that current democracies are stronger, are more powerful. At the same time, was my opening statement, and coming back to the point about emotions, politicians have always dealt with emotions. Whether it be John F. Kennedy saying we'll put a man on the moon, it was substantiated by nothing. They didn't even have a rocket, but they did it. A little bit later than predicted, but they did it. So I mean, in the end, everything is emotion. And so I think discourse focused on emotion, I think, is not the relevant one, because in my opinion, we have certain psychological biases as human beings. I mean, I'm a biologist by training, and so in that sense, we look at the world in a certain way, we captivate certain things in certain ways, and we do interpretations of certain events in the world in certain ways. And I think if you want to open up that discussion, then you go into also a very strange direction. Education is one element, yes, but if you go to a deeper level, I mean, you're talking about changing behavior of people, how they perceive the reality. And I think this is opening up a whole box of Pandora where you need another conference or two to discuss this. I mean, there's one very nice book I always make reference to. It's called The Myth of the Rational Voter. It's clearly shown that some people, most people, have biases which play a role in public discourse, which play a role on how they perceive certain statements made by politicians. So also there we already know for a long time that this is playing, and good politicians manage to find the right balance between, based on facts, trying to put society forward, but also making an emotional appeal on the public to support them. And those go hand in hand in my opinion.
Just to quickly react on emotions, I slightly disagree. There are regulations, or at least common sense, but also regulations, for example, for advertising industry, not to play with certain emotions. You can't have advertising using any kind of, raising any kind of emotions. I remember the story about, Mercedes, it was an anecdotal one, that was considering or just discussing as a part of